Yeah, we've got a weird name.
Most people just call us up.
Most people call us up there.
We're up there, everywhere.
The name is weird. Cool, but weird.
Well, we're cloud-based.
Like the clouds, we're everywhere.
No, we're not Swedish.
Ja, vi är svenska.
Swedish, but global.
We started in Stockholm.
Now, we're everywhere.
We're up there everywhere.
The global cloud-based agency.
Welcome to everyone here in the audience today. Really great to have all of you here. Welcome to our distinguished panelists and of course everyone online as well. I'm Lawrence Mazel. I'm CEO of Up There Everywhere. As you heard, we're a global branding, marketing, and digital marketing agency with our global headquarters here in Stockholm. And we're also the host of today's event, our Branding Question Time. Born in the USA or Sweden or Germany or Firenze, a look at how why brands use place of origin to help shape their identity and authenticity. To kick off today's program, I'd like to invite Lotte Ungerth to the stage. Lotte is Global Medical Marketing Director for Italian aesthetics company RELIFE. She will share a short presentation with us around the RELIFE brand journey, which starts in stunning Firenze, Florence, Italy, and then we will move further into our broader panel discussions. Please join me in welcoming Lotte Ungerth.
Thank you so much, Lawrence, and thank you all for having me here. I am Charlotte Ungerth. I'm the marketing director of RELIFE, and RELIFE is a company with its roots in Florence. We're also part of a larger group, the Menarini Group, a pharmaceutical company that started in Florence over a century ago. It's present in 140 countries with 18,000 employees. However, this branch of the company is quite new. So let me introduce to you RELIFE with this movie, just to set the stage. we decided to reposition our company some year ago. So why did we start to think about having Florence as part of our positioning, as this is the origin of our company? We did discuss this in a branding workshop. Actually, Julian was there. It's about 1 year ago now. And we joined forces with all of our teams from the different countries to also discuss how could we assess the benefits of including Florence in our positioning? What could be the benefits of using that in our narrative? Of course, it's about authenticity and trust. Would we have it? Yes. Cultural identity. Do we feel that we're Italian? Yes. Storytelling. Could it be a part of telling the story about our company and the field we're operating in? Is that also having a benefit of including Florence in our positioning? Indeed. Also, it induces quite a lot of local pride because it is a city people go to also enjoy the art and beauty and the science, because it's really based the cradle of Renaissance. Can we use some heritage marketing? Sure. The company was actually originated in Florence many, many years ago. And is it also beneficial with regards to long-term brand equity? And I think we said yes to many of these points. And for those of you that have been in this magical city of Florence, you know, cradle of Renaissance. It also came from the Medicis company, the Medicis family that really invited all the great artists to Florence. Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Raphael, Botticelli, everyone was really there to create the art and beauty and the cradle of Renaissance. So we have a lot of heritage to build from that. It also meets the category where we work in aesthetics medicine, and that's about self-esteem, confidence, beauty. So we then said, like, where do we come from? And we are part of art and beauty and to create beauty, and we're also part science. So we're also Italian, so timeless beauty could be something that we can join forces under. And that makes us unique, because in our industry, looking at timeless, that is really the core for the raison d'etre of aesthetics. And then looking into Italian, that is really timeless beauty. So those two creates RELIFE, the Italian aesthetics company from Reisz. And our campaign is now L'Estetica Senza Tempo. And we also discussed around our tonality, because we want to define what we are and what we're not, because being Italian can be a lot of different things. So of course we discussed a lot what we are. We're more the David, we're more Gucci, we're not Dolce & Gabbana, we're not Donatella Versace, we're more like Sophia Loren, we're more effortless, we are in Florence, so we're not the 16th capital, we are the David, and we're warm. We use the Tuscan sun and our sunshine, and really vivacious. So it was very important for us to define what Italian that we are. And this rich governance, with also installing a new color into our color palette, using the terracotta color, which then represents the warm Tuscan sun, was something that we also could introduce. It is representing our home of timeless, effortless beauty and style. And this also terracotta color could be globally aspirational. If we're looking at the rooftops of Florence, they're also in terracotta color. So it really embraces this inviting color. It's warm and represents also a city in a beautiful way. And it can also be ownable. When we looked at how we then make our positioning come alive, we did invite models to our city, and we selected models that have a classic style that could represent timeless beauty, and also that are approachable and relatable. And we picture them in the iconic landmarks of our beautiful city of Florence. So you can see them there at Ponte Vecchio, at the Duomo, and in the small streets of Florence. So it was really beautiful photo shoot that we did in May this year together with the talented Chris Tribblehorn. So bringing our positioning to life, we then looked into how we could use the dramatic light and shadow that lean into this timeless glamour. So having our R with the iconic R, we made that into a symbol also behind the model, embracing this Tuscan warm sun and this terracotta color. And the imagery is also very much aligned to fashion and lifestyle, which also part of what our consumers are looking for, and also looking into this natural beauty. We have a tagline that is today, tomorrow, timeless, and also looking into our category, it really encapsulates the whole proposition of benefits for the aesthetics industry to really look without the signs of the times and to be as beautiful tomorrow as you are today. And then if we're moving forward, looking into for the consumers, we used our brand line as La tua bellezza senza tempo, your timeless beauty, because it resonates with the consumer, and we wanted to speak to them in the Italian language, also to use our heritage. So it's really compelling propositioning that is really universally relevant. And this will be the imagery that we will roll out globally throughout the next year. We did kick off this campaign in Florence and now in September at our Senza Tempo event. And we also launched our global website, relifeaesthetics.com. That also has a timeless, I think I need to move a little bit closer to this one because it's really not working so well with the clicker. Yes, better. So this website is really designed with timeless style and totally aligned with lifetime and fashion that really is really connecting with the audience and very consumer focused. When we welcomed our guests to our event in Florence, we also had this billboard at the airport, so they also could see the campaign already coming alive when they landed at the airport in Florence. So in the social media, also we connected with all the iconic landmarks that is part of Florence and connect this beauty and the timeless Italian style in all the imagery, in all the posts, in all the small videos that we're also making very relatable. They're really in this warm, vivacious city of Florence. And also looking at the category that we're in, having this warm terracotta color in our color palette also sets us aside and really differentiates from the other brands that lose more a nude, maybe more blue or purple color palette. So this terracotta color also differentiates and really sets us aside. So with that said, we're also looking into some categories, why we also build our positioning to create engagement. It was also, of course, to grow the business for us and for our customers. So having a positioning where we could build presence, also online with our websites and also our SEO strategy, we investment in a lot to be able to really create more presence, and also to create demand, to attract patients, consumers, doctors that wants to work with us, and also that we could have this in an engagement. Did we change the batteries? Yes. Supporting practitioners with a lot of attractive materials that they could also use in their clinics. So we have it also in our RELIFE Academy platform and create all the engagement around the city that is also attractive for the category. And time to discover our secret. Thank you. So now it's time to making beauty timeless. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lottie. And please take a seat on our panelists over here, and soon we'll be welcoming the rest of the panelists to join us. But first, again, thank you for not only an insightful presentation, but really a stunning presentation. Really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
So now I'd like to turn things over to today's moderator, Maddy Savage. Maddy is a freelance documentary maker, a podcaster, and a journalist for British and Swedish media, including the BBC, Monocle Radio, Naudio, and Podlit. Maddy's favorite assignments, besides being with us here today, include Nordic innovation, sustainability, and lifestyle trends. Please join me in welcoming Maddy Savage to the stage. Maddy?
Thank you so much for that introduction. Great to be here. Good to see so many of you here in Stockholm and lots of you watching on the live stream. We're grateful to have you with us as well. And thanks again to you, Lottie. So yeah, essentially I'm going to be guiding this discussion, which is all about connecting brands to identity and place. And so Lottie kind of set the scene for us, and we've got some other panelists which will be digging a little bit deeper. All of the questions that we're putting to our panelists today have come from you, that you've submitted in advance. Yeah, less from me and more from you. So let's introduce our panelists. Welcome up to the stage. Take a seat and we'll do your introductions from the stage, please. Let's give them a round of applause.
Hej. Värdefullt sällskap.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about how and why brands use places to shape their brand identity and some of the challenges and opportunities that this brings. So joining Lottie, who we've already met briefly, we've got Michael or Mikael, what would you prefer?
Mikael.
Mikael Persson Gripkow, who is course director in place branding at the Berghs School of Communication in Stockholm here in Sweden. So let's start with you. Before we dive into some of the audience questions, I'd like to know, where are you originally from and is it your favourite place?
Well, I'm from West Sweden, from the city of Trollhättan, known for the waterfalls and for Saab automobile. And, well, my favorite place, I would say, is not Trollhättan any longer, but rather, I love Paris. I think Paris stands for timeless. I think it stands for innovation, and I really think it's going to be one of the most sustainable cities in the world in some years to come.
Interesting. Love Paris as well. Anna, next, Head of Communication and Marketing at AMS Fastigheter, which is a major property company here in Stockholm, and formerly worked for Stockholm Business Region, which is the business and destination development agency based here in the city of Stockholm. So Anna, a bit local, but what is your absolute most favourite place within Stockholm and why?
I think my favorite place in Stockholm is either Södermalm, the heights of Södermalm, watching out at the sea.
It's one of the islands in the city.
Yeah, or actually the bridge between, or to Skeppsholmen. There's an old bridge in wood with really nice surroundings.
Yeah, so you like being by the water.
Yeah.
That's very clear. All right, next up we have Julian Reisz. He's a Director of Innovation at ARLA Foods, which is one of the biggest dairy and food brands here in the Nordics. If you could be in any other place in the world apart from Stockholm right now, where would you be, Julian?
Probably Edinburgh. It's a city where I studied, so probably reminiscing on my fun student years, but it's one of those cities that's the perfect size, not too big, and yet so much going on. Brilliant city and close to nature and
So a fan of culture.
Yes.
Yes. And last but not least, we have Julian Stubbs, who is Head of Strategic Branding for Up There Everywhere, who are, of course, hosting today's event. And one of your claims to fame, Julian, is you came up with the slogan that Stockholm is the capital of Scandinavia.
Yes.
But apart from Stockholm, what is your favourite capital in the world?
I apologise if there's any Norwegians or Danes in the audience or online. But the fact is, Stockholm is the capital of Scandinavia. I always think you can't love Paris and London equally. You love one or the other, and I love London because I lived there. I lived in Marylebone for some years. It's got more culture, more restaurants, more theatre, more everything, and history. We go back to the Romans. So London.
Okay. So I guess that sets the scene, really, of how important place is to all of us. We experience something when we visit a place. We identify with certain things in that place. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how all of that connects with leveraging a brand. And these are the questions that have come in from the audience. So we're going to dive right in. What are the key benefits of leveraging a place in brand identity? Let's start with Mikko.
I think it really comes back to being from somewhere, talking about your history, where you come from, but also relate to your target customer and make that history into an asset for your consumers. I think I used to be the marketing and brand director of Absolut Vodka, and I think they really did that very well before me by putting country of Sweden, by putting made in Aarhus, Sweden. And Aarhus is really the home of Absolut, and it still is. Every drop of Absolut, 100 million bottles every year, is made in Aarhus, Sweden. So I think the origin is really an asset because everybody, even though you just drink Absolut and you don't really know where it comes from, always when you come into connection and build relations with a brand, you want to know a little bit more. And then when you scrap the surface, if you can tell where you're from and that you have a great history, I think that's a really good asset.
Would you agree, Anna? What's your perspective?
Yeah, but I agree. I think it's might be easier to actually running a place because you have a deeper DNA. You have a longer history back than a physical product in that way. And you can also, it's so many facts and figures, you can pick a little bit what you like. So it's easier with the packaging of a place, actually. Yeah, connected to a brand.
Yeah, but as Lottie, as we were hearing, you've connected a brand to a place that didn't necessarily have that connection before, and you touched on some of the main points about why you did that. What would you say the general advantages are? Why should other companies perhaps follow in your footsteps?
Well, it depends on what the company stands for, of course, the brand and what are their consumers. And if you can connect some points from the heritage of the city with actually what the brand delivers and that is a benefit for the consumer, it all connects. But of course, you also want to reflect on what could be some of the risks, but maybe we'll come to that later.
Yeah, and you mentioned that Julian had been involved in some of the brainstorming around this. Julian, so I want to ask you, why don't most brands take this opportunity? That's a question that we've had in. Yep. Why don't most brands use their origins in their identity?
I think each brand has to be looked at individually, and you have to think about the most important thing in marketing, branding, is positioning. What you stand for. So if you get that right, everything else becomes easier. And so I think it's really looking at that, and sometimes it's not appropriate, sometimes it is. Sometimes companies do tie themselves to a position and then have to back out of it because it's not appropriate any longer. So I think you really have to take that first look at what your brand is all about, what your ambitions are, and is it going to be appropriate for the long haul.
So Julian, Reisz, what's the situation at ARLA? How much is it a focus there?
It slightly depends on the product category. So I think there's a category perspective to it as well. Some categories need to be more differentiated. So if you look at bottled water, basically what's inside the water's always basically tastes like tap water. So the place of origin is really important. Lipstick, you've got Rimmel London, L'Oreal Paris, Maybelline New York.
We all remember them.
It creates a whole vision, a whole style, and so in ARLA, it slightly depends on the category. So I think there's also some provenances that are protected. So just like with cognac or champagne. Certain cheeses, halloumi, can only be made in Cyprus. Parmesan can only be made in Parma. But cheddar could be made anywhere in the world. Greek yogurt can be made anywhere in the world. So the associations of the place with the product category depend slightly on what you're trying to project.
Yeah, we've got quite a few more questions about food, which we'll get to a bit later if we have time. But, I mean, are there any examples of where it's gone wrong? Mikael, perhaps you've got an overview of this.
Well, one example is in 2009 when Volkswagen was involved into the Dieselgate scandal, when they hid to everybody that they were polluting the world 40 times worse than they were saying in their communication. And of course that diluted the brand completely. And being German, trustworthy, ordinary, like really strict to everything, that really did not connect with being German. So that was really one of the biggest scandals in the business world in Germany ever.
Whereas they previously really sold themselves
Exactly.
on being a German company. And actually, we've got a few similar questions connected to that. I don't know if anyone in the audience or online was at a previous Up There Everywhere session earlier in the year, where we talked about whether the world had fallen out of love with the Swedish brand, because there was a lot in the media around that time around gang violence and other issues. And we have a question saying, are these new perceptions of Sweden potentially affecting other big brands which already have Sweden entwined in their identities, in particular IKEA? So in Volkswagen's example, they had actually done something wrong, but as far as we know, IKEA is, for the most part, very separate from gang violence. So is there a chance that IKEA and big Swedish brands are being damaged? Let's take that for Anna.
Of course it is in the long run, but often things like that, and I remember when I was in the city of Stockholm, it was a lot of talking about non-going zones, and also nowadays about gangs and shootings. Of course it is a risk in the long term, but it's often takes some time to really, I mean, it hits some people globally, but not everyone. So still it's kind of nice figures when you see other visitors in Stockholm and like that. So yeah, it could be a risk, but as a city, of course, it's a way to communicate in another way in that kind of situation. But of course it can hit other companies also.
Yeah, Julian, Stubbs, what do you think? We're sort of 8-9 months on from when there was peak coverage of those issues.
We held our event on Valentine's Day. Has the world fallen out of love with the Swedish brand? Very appropriate. And what was interesting when we started looking into this statistics, the benchmarks, how we're ranked globally, it hasn't had that much of an impact yet. So the fact is it does take time for those things to have an impact on visitor numbers, inward investment. And so it does take a while, but you've got to do something about it. I'd be much more concerned at the moment for Sweden and for Stockholm with the lack of investment in SAS and our land becoming less of a hub. That's at the moment far more dangerous, I'd say, for the economy.
What about the Northvolt scandal? That's a big electric battery manufacturer up in northern Sweden. Lost huge numbers of job losses there, various scandals, whereas northern Sweden has really presented itself as a hub for green tech over the last few years. Michael, what are your perspectives on that?
Of course, that's a crisis right now, and of course a severe crisis when it comes to the green development. But look at H2 Steels and the hybrid investments that are hopefully going to happen. There's a lot of investments happening in that area on the same time. So it's not just Northvolt that is standing behind that green revolution. So standing on a lot of pillars, that's much easier for a region or country than just standing on one company.
So this leads us on to our next question. How can brands navigate controversies related to their place of origin? Let's bring in Lottie. What are your perspectives on this?
I think it's important to define what you are and what you're not when you're defining your brand within, connecting it to a city or a country. As we discussed with the brand tonality, what we are, what Italian. Italian can also be a lot of soccer players, a lot of politicians, a lot of food, a lot of wine, a lot of artists, a lot of actors, and also looking in how that relates to your brand. It's important to define what you are and what you're not. And if there's any risk associated with it. For Italy, I think, of course, there's been a lot of scandals in Italy, but also at the same time, they're really into this kind of dolce far niente. They're really into this timeless. It's and also with the heritage of Florence, for instance, which we picked then as one city, we see that it's really very super connected with this kind of art and beauty and Renaissance. So for us, it felt like a safe bet to connect to that.
Yeah.
It had a lot of things that resonated very well with it.
Despite, as you say, maybe other aspects of Italian culture, politics,
Exactly.
still lingering around in the background, but making the most of what you saw as the core message that could resonate and be positive. Julian, what would you add to that?
I would say when you get it wrong, you have to put your hand up and say, we got it wrong, we messed up. That's the first thing. And too many brands who ignore it, that they made a mistake or got it wrong or there's something in their past, try to wash over it, and it doesn't work because we all know the truth. And you just think bad of the brand. I'll give you an example. If you go back to the mid-90s, about 95, a certain airline did market research on their brand. And the research told them that they were seen as stuffy, arrogant, a bit too posh, not terribly good service, and very old-fashioned. That airline was British Airways. So what do they decide to do? Oh, we'll get rid of the flag. We're now more international. We'll paint all the airplanes in wild, international colours. It was absolutely a disaster. Absolutely. They got halfway through the repaint of the livery, about £60 million, halfway through, and the public hated it. Because what they didn't ask was, well, why do you like us? And it was because you're starchy, stuffy, British. And that was the truth of it. And they kind of want to be something they weren't. And I think that's a real danger. And British Airways then came out and said, actually, we got it wrong. And they've gone back to now the blue, red and white flag device.
Miko, do you think most brands would be brave enough to do that?
To say that they did something wrong?
Yeah.
I think the brands that survive do that.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you get more questions and you get more doubts about your credibility and about what you stand for.
I should just say we're hoping to wrap this up with a bit of time for more audience questions. So if anyone's sitting here listening thinking I've got something I want to add or a follow-up, we'll have some microphones towards the end of this session. We've had a few questions about sustainability and production processes. This was a popular question or themes around this question. Is emphasizing a brand's origins while outsourcing production to places like China actually a form of origin washing? So similar to greenwashing. And one example could be Apple products designed in California, but they're actually made in China. And let's bring in Julian Reisz on this one.
Well, I think electronics tend to be really generic in terms of place of origin. Most of them are made in China. So I do think it's interesting that they're talking about designed in California, and clearly a lot of the associations of the brand with Steve Jobs that are connected to California, and most people don't think about production. Most people don't think, they think about packaging, they think about what the product experience is like, but they don't actually think about factories and how they're made. So I do think if there's a scandal that it's a big risk, but I actually don't see it as a huge risk in terms of people. That's not how people perceive brands.
I think you're right about technology, but if I'm going to buy a pair of Gucci shoes, I want to know there's some guy in Florence making them. So I think for that market, it's very appropriate and different.
And it has been a big issue with regard to sustainability, particularly here in the Nordics, where brands that have had a very close connection to sustainability have been found to have had unethical practices in some of their factories. Lottie, anything else to add from your perspective? I mean, what do you think about outsourcing but not really mentioning that as part of your branding?
No, I think as all the other panels also mentioned, that we live in a world with a lot of transparency, and you can really find things out quite quickly. So you need to be authentic, and you need to be trustworthy, and you need to walk the talk and not do greenwashing, or you need to actively work with maintaining your brand identity and not try to kind of shovel things away, because it will be found out. It's very easy to find out these days.
We've talked quite a lot about global brands, but we also have a question saying, is the approach of place in your branding just for big corporations? Can this even be useful for solopreneurs and small companies? And I think this is really interesting. I've often worked with startups, reported on startups from here in Sweden, which is known for things like trust, sustainability, but they haven't thought about it necessarily as part of their brand. Anna, what's your take?
Absolutely. It's a good way to do for startups as in the same way for big companies. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, are there any good examples of startups that you think have done well?
Into startups?
Yeah, or solopreneurs, or which aspects would you be asking them to lift if they were sort of?
We are really strong in sustainability. We're the most investments into Stockholm and Sweden in Europe. I think we scored 1 or 2nd place a couple of years, so sustainability is a really great sector to take use of the Stockholm brand and the Sweden nationality also in. I'm thinking of, there are a lot of entrepreneurs and also serial entrepreneurs who did it actually, and it's mostly within tech, because we've been so strong within tech for many years. So you have, of course, you can say the Spotify, for one example, doesn't do that in their marketing, but they do it in their employees with branding. I mean, we have.
They offer things like they sell that you can get parental leave and things like that, and be part
they
of
do
the Swedish
like a secondary thought of the parental leave and the branding of Sweden within their culture in one way. So that's not visible for the customers, but it's visible for all the employees. I think that also builds the brand.
Yeah, but I mean, for them as an example, they are a big brand now. Julian, what would you be your advice to small businesses starting or startups, solopreneurs? Why would you encourage them in some cases to think about place and identity?
Because I think it gives you immediately, let's face it, if you're starting up and you're an entrepreneur, you don't have a ton of money. So you've got to make use of all the assets you've got. And one of the assets you've got is where you come from and probably what's in your culture. And so actually leveraging that gives you an immediate connection. So if I walk into the room and meet a potential client and say, I'm from Stockholm, Sweden, they get a whole bunch of values for free. They know something about me and the company immediately, and that's the asset you get. Now, the downside to that can be that maybe in the longer term, that's not going to serve your goals. And again, to use a sort of an example, you go back to the early 20th century, mining company, North Minnesota. They're a mining company selling to manufacturers, and they call themselves Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. 5 guys. At that stage, it stood them perfectly well. They were selling in Minnesota. Today, that company's 3M. So they had to back out of it when it became inappropriate and actually rebrand and sort of, okay, they stepped the thing up again. So as I said, it's about what's appropriate for the long term.
Yeah, pinpointing which point in your journey and
which point
strategy.
will this run out, or can we stick with it?
Yeah.
So.
Julian Reisz, what would you add to that?
I've got a good example relating back to the company we worked for, Absolute. I think the context at the time is really important. So when Absolute launched in 1979, I think it was, launched in New York in the middle of the Cold War. It was one of the first vodkas that wasn't a Russian vodka. It's genius to say we're a Swedish vodka. So you feel like a rebel. It feels really exciting. It feels so much more acceptable. It's immediately the cool vodka because it's not Russian. So I think there's also not only positive associations of Sweden, but also the fact that it's not Russian vodka at the time was a genius move.
Yeah, really interesting.
Also
And that
creates
brings
a lot of intercompany pride by the employees, because you have also defined a lot of the benefits of the city that you're working on, or working from or are from working in, and that this pride, the employee pride, you can come a long way with that.
It filters out.
Yeah.
So when they're talking about where they work at a dinner party or when they're picking up their kids, it creeps
they're
in.
walking ambassadors of the brand.
Exactly. But Julian Reisz mentioned Absolute, and we have, as I said, had a lot of questions about food and drink. If it's making you hungry, those of you in the audience, just to let you know, there will be some place-related snacks later. So hold tight. So some of the food and drink brands that use their place of origin in their identity. We've got Västerbotten cheese here in Sweden, drinks brand Ramlösa in the UK, cheddar cheese, Worcestershire sauce, Scotch whiskey in France, Dijon mustard, champagne. Okay, the list goes on. So let's talk to Julian Reisz from ARLA. Why, you mentioned briefly earlier on, but why does it work so well?
I think you get, like Julian was saying, a lot of the positive associations of that country. So Dijon, although Dijon and cheddar are exceptions, they actually can be produced anywhere in the world. But for the others, they have to be made in that place. And so you're buying a piece of that country, you're buying a piece of French culture. Even if you've never been to Dijon, it feels a bit more sophisticated. So you're not just buying a generic local mustard that you have at your table. So I think that there's a lot of that, especially with food, and it comes from wine, it comes from cooperatives that got together and created protective labels for the place of origin. It kind of premiumizes the perception of that food by connecting it to a place of origin.
Would the rest of you agree?
Totally. I'm a cheese fanatic. I worked my first job at college. I worked on a cheese stall selling cheeses. Fell in love with cheese at that point. I would work for Västerbotten or Cheddar, anybody for free. They just feed me. I'd be very happy. But it gives, there are protections. There's the PDO, protection designated origin. So certain, like champagne. Who wants champagne? Who wants Californian sparkling wine? There's a huge difference. And it's protected. You can't make champagne anyplace else. So there are protections, but it lends so much to food products.
This is not a question from the audience, Julian, but what is your favourite, cheddar or Västerbotten?
Now you've got me. Well, the top three, Gruyere, as my wife will tell you, I will drive a long way in a day to get a fondue, which I did once. So Gruyere goes top. Västerbotten probably second and cheddar third.
Västerbotten's overtaken cheddar for me as well.
I love Västerbotten.
Sorry to all the Brits.
I know. Yeah.
Could there ever be an effect of a food making a place cooler or more well known? So, with champagne, for example, we associate it with luxury. But, could you, I don't know, develop a new food and then that gets popular and then a place becomes popular? Are there any examples of it working the other way around?
In Sweden, Sigtuna. So
Okay.
we have Sigtuna beer and Sigtuna brewery, and they make gin in Sigtuna. So absolutely, it can have an impact when you get those kind of things.
I think also like Italy, Amarone wines back in the days, also the way they produced wines in this region in Valpolicella was maybe not so sophisticated at that time. And then they developed this ranking, and then the Amarone wine was more expensive because of the production technique, and it became more exclusive. So that's one other interesting from Italy.
I think if you ask someone to place Vermont on a map, they might struggle, but Ben & Jerry's became really popular, and I think it's probably put Vermont on the map. And has associations of being some state up in the north near Canada, liberal, but probably people don't know much more than that apart from Ben & Jerry's.
And if you like ice cream, it's a good association. We do live in a global world, though, and we've had some questions about what you should do if your brand has different origins. This specific question, what should a company do with a part Swedish, part South Asian origin? We have 2 offices in 2 continents. So should we keep branding ourselves as Swedish? Let's put that to Mikael.
Depends on the audience. Who is the target group and what do they prefer? It has to come back to the target group and where your money will come from. So I would say, depending on what associations the target group want to be associated with and what they do they want to consume.
I'd add to that, equally important is internally, how people internally feel. Because you look at the, well, it wasn't a merger in the end, Volvo, Renault, when they tried to put them together, it just didn't work, the cultures. So you have to think about that as well. So.
Anna? I was a part in the establishment of a Uniqlo flagship store in the first in Nordics, and what we saw was that it was so many things that got together between the Japan culture and the Swedish culture. So it was so many similarities that you didn't really realize in the first sight. Yeah. So you can also find the strengthening part of that.
Yeah, to see what brands have in common. Yes.
And also I was with Volvo when the Chinese took over and they wanted to position Volvo as the most luxurious brand in the world. And that went completely against the brand roots of Volvo. So all the company, all the employees and also the management protested. So now they've gone back to the human-centric approach again.
And it's very interesting with Volvo. I mean, you think about, well, if you were to choose and buy a Volvo, and I've got plenty of friends globally who still buy a Volvo because it's Swedish in their minds. It's still Swedish in their minds. So very interesting. They've kept that positioning.
Yeah.
And it's positioning. And I would say one thing that is really interesting right now is Scandinavian Airlines. It used to be Swedish, Norwegian, and Danish.
Don't get Julian started.
Now it's sold to the Danish state, to an equity company, and to Air France and KLM. It's still Scandinavian.
Do you know the thing I got on the airline a month ago?
Here we go.
And this is the first time it really, really got to me. I'm British originally, now I'm Swedish. Got on, and they couldn't speak Swedish, the crew. And I don't know why it annoyed me, because I get on Norwegian and I get on other airlines, and they don't speak Swedish. But Scandinavian Airlines, they should speak Scandinavian. And that really got to me. I just thought this brand is losing the plot. It really is.
I'm afraid we don't have anyone from SA from the airline to defend themselves. But really interesting how it affects your perception of different airlines. Another question from the audience before we open up to the floor. How does an entity continue to defend its position if competition starts to claim the same identity, especially if the competition isn't from that city or country but makes it look like they are? Who'd like to answer this one? Julian? Yes.
I think back to what Lottie was saying, you need to really choose what are the specific aspects of that origin that you're building your positioning around. So hopefully they're not as, well, they will be quite hard to steal if they are actually part of your brand's DNA.
The oldest rule in positioning is you're building a positioning for one company, yours. There's going to be no competitor. You are going to be number one. And I remember when we did the research on the positionings, how many aesthetics brands are there from Italy? Well, let's narrow it. From Florence, one. RELIFE. Nobody's going to take that.
It needs to be ownable.
You have to own it, and nobody can take that away from it, and then you fight like hell to make sure they can't take it away from you.
What happens if someone rocks up in Venice and does a kind of similar strategy?
Of course they can do that, but we're still positioning ourselves in Firenze and not Italian only. So it's also zooming in on what's really relevant for you that you can own, that's authentic. And if you expand and they become too generic, then it's snatchable by someone else.
And they're always number two. When we did Capital of Scandinavia, Copenhagen for a while thought, okay, well, we'll say the same thing.
Yeah. They tried, actually.
They tried, and the fact is you can't. Somebody else has got there first, and you defend it, and that's yours, unless you abandon it. That's happened, and brands have regretted it, like Coke and Pepsi in the 80s. Coke walked away from classic Coke. Pepsi grabbed the spot.
Yeah.
So you've got to kind of hang on to what you are.
They also tried Greater Copenhagen for a while, didn't they? To incorporate Skåne in southern Sweden, and nobody really liked that.
No.
Okay, well, let's see if anyone in the audience would like to put some questions to our panellists. We've got a roaming microphone. Don't be shy. There will be a chance to approach our panellists one-to-one in the mingle later as well. But do I see a hand raised? Yes, thank you so much. We'll bring a mic down so that the live streamers can hear you as well.
Thank you guys for a good conversation. I have a question about, we've talked a lot about the history in the past, but who is doing something good today? And who do you think will be around in like 10 years when it comes to brand legacy and stuff like this? And what about it? Like, what are they doing right? So what do you think what are people doing right today?
Thank you. Should we start with Mikael on that one?
I think there's a lot of really good brands who do good things and work with CSR, do well for the country where they work. But it has to come with relevance and be relevant to your target group. So I can't see any Scandinavian companies that will disappear in 10 years. But I really think that Spotify will be there in 10 years. I think they develop their product, they change their offers, they go into different markets. That's one brand, one Scandinavian brand that I think definitely will be there and be bigger.
I think IKEA will. I think they're big enough, wise enough, smart enough to come through any issues Sweden's got temporarily. So I think they'll definitely still be around in 10 to 15 years. Interesting thing about IKEA and probably Volvo, if you think about the biggest promoters of Sweden as a place, it's not the government spending money with Stockholm Business Region or whoever, it's IKEA. You know, the world gets its Swedish fix from IKEA, whether it's the meatballs, the herring and the Billy bookcase or whatever, that is the Swedish fix for the global audience. So it's a terribly important brand for Sweden.
Anyone got any more newer disruptive brands to answer that question? I guess there's a space for it, for people to leverage. Any more questions from the audience? Yes, we have a gentleman in the middle.
Thank you so much for a great inspirational talk. My question is really not maybe so much about branding, place branding, but Tesla. If anyone would like to just comment on Tesla, and what I would say, for me, Tesla was very innovative and it was very California. Whereas now with Elon Musk, it's completely destroying every good thing it had. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on sort of what's going on with a brand like that where someone hijacks and goes the other way around.
I can give one answer, but maybe, and this is again from the heart, I would say their biggest problem today is Elon Musk. I think the product is amazing. I think what they've built is incredible with the charging network. I think consumers, it goes through their head, do I really want to buy a product? Now, either they love him or hate him, but I think there's a big issue of Elon Musk wrapped up in it. And as I say, you love him or hate him. Could go either way. I know, yeah. But the fact is, it's a great car. I mean, when they were in Fremont, California, you're right. It was a Californian idea. So,
and the Californian associations, you then immediately get the Silicon Valley associations.
Yep.
So it's not Detroit, a traditional car maker.
No, everything else.
It's a tech company.
Yeah, we don't want to get sued by Elon Musk, but I mean, looking at social media platforms as well, I mean, X has lost a lot of people, just stopped using it and gone to alternatives since he's been there as well. Any more questions from the audience? We've probably got time for 2 more. So yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you for a great panel discussion. I just want to show appreciation to companies that also acknowledges problems like where they're actually from or the cities or the countries that they are associating themselves with. For example, like I work with the NGO and we deal with gang violence questions, but we also get support from the biggest companies in Sweden. So it's important as a brand manager to think about that aspect as well, so you're not turning a blind eye to what's going on in the society. This must say that.
Yeah, thank you.
Just follow up on that. The brands saying there's something wrong with our brand, we've got to fix it. If you look at a brand like, if you remember, Uncle Ben's Reisz, okay, a few years now back, they sort of acknowledged that it was only late 2019, 2020, they realized that there's something wrong with a brand promoting stereotypes in the modern world. And it was inappropriate. And they kind of, again, held their hand up and said, listen, you know, we want to change this. It needs to change. It's now become Ben's. But hand in hand with that, they spent an awful lot of money on equality of food in deprived areas. They did a lot of other things. Sales continued. Sales are rising today. And they've transitioned from what they were to this new brand. So again, you have to acknowledge it and do something about it, positive.
Yeah, that's why big companies like IKEA, for example, they survive because they move with the times.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. No pressure, but we do have time for one more question.
Just to build on that one, I think KFC is an interesting case where Kentucky Fried Chicken, I think most of the audience probably know what KFC stands for.
There's a new one in Lilleholmen in Stockholm for those based in the audience.
I can imagine that my kids won't know what KFC stands for.
No, exactly.
And the times of kind of southern fried chicken in the rest of the world maybe aren't the healthy fast food that everyone's looking for.
No.
Thank you for that example. Anyone ask questions, or are people ready to go and try some food?
I've been told we've got cheddar cheese out there.
Yeah, me too. Well, I'm going to say a huge thank you to our panellists. Really interesting and insightful discussion. So thank you to all of us for joining us here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think Lawrence is going to come up and tell us a little bit more about what's going on here in Stockholm. And we should also say thank you and goodbye to all of our viewers online as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Maddy, and all of our panelists. So as you heard, we have a mingle outside. You can continue to ask questions to the panelists as well. They'll be joining us afterwards. And we'd just like to give a small token of appreciation to everyone. And Matthias, if you could give me a hand here.
Ooh.
Great.
Oh my God, it's not cheddar cheese.
So, well, thank you so much.
It's chocolate for those who can't see.
No,
or it looks like that from the bags. I don't know what's in them actually.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Iconic chocolate.
Thank you, Julian. Yes.
Oh,
sir.
yeah.
Okay, please.
Thank you.
Please join us outside for the mingle. Thank you.
Thank you.